There's a switch that flips inside an empath, and when it flips, everyone who knows them feels it instantly. It's not loud. There's no announcement, no confrontation, no explanation. One day, the empath just stops, and the silence is deafening. Carl Jung witnessed this transformation hundreds of times in his practice, and what fascinated him wasn't that empaths eventually stopped caring. It's that they all stopped caring about the exact same things, in the exact same way, at almost the exact same stage of development. Like there was a psychological program running in the background, counting down to an inevitable moment of shutdown. Jung called this the death that births consciousness, and he considered it one of the most important psychological thresholds a human being could cross, because when an empath stops caring, they don't become heartless. They become something far more dangerous to the systems that were built on exploiting them. They become unavailable, unmanipulatable, unmoved by tactics that used to control them effortlessly. And that unavailability doesn't look like anger or bitterness, it looks like peace, which is exactly what makes everyone so uncomfortable. In this video, we're breaking down what Jung really discovered about this moment. Not the Instagram version about setting boundaries, the real psychological shift that happens when an empath finally integrates the one truth they've been running from their entire life. If you've ever felt yourself going numb to people you used to care about deeply, if you've noticed yourself feeling less and less moved by emotional appeals that used to work on you, if you're starting to feel guilty about not feeling guilty anymore, this will explain what's actually happening. You're not becoming cold, you're becoming conscious. Let's talk about what that actually means. Before we can understand the moment an empath stops caring, we need to map the psychological architecture they built that made them care too much in the first place. Because empaths don't just naturally care more than other people. They were trained to, conditioned to, rewarded for it until it became their entire operating system. Here's what that looks like in practice. The empath is always the one checking in, remembering birthdays, noticing when something's off, asking the questions that show they were actually listening last time. This seems nice, thoughtful, like they're just naturally considerate people, but Jung saw something else. He saw people who had learned that their value was directly tied to their utility, that being needed was the only reliable path to being wanted. Think about the origin story. Most empaths have a version of the same childhood, not necessarily traumatic in the obvious ways, but destabilizing in subtle ones. Maybe they had a parent who was emotionally unpredictable, so they learned to read micro-expressions, vocal tones, energy shifts, became experts at sensing storms before they hit so they could brace themselves or diffuse the situation. Maybe they had a sibling who got all the attention, the difficult one, the sick one, the golden child. So they carved out value by being easy, by not having needs, by making everyone's life simpler, just by existing quietly in the background. Maybe their parents' marriage was quietly falling apart, and they unconsciously took on the role of emotional glue, keeping mum company, listening to dad's complaints, trying to be good enough that maybe the family would stay together. Whatever the specific circumstances, the lesson was the same. Your emotional labor earns you the right to exist here. This gets internalized as identity, not just I'm helpful, but I am the help I provide. Remove the helping, and what's left? That question is too terrifying to even ask, so they don't ask it. They just keep helping, keep caring, keep showing up, keep carrying emotional weight that was never theirs to carry. Jung called this the caretaker complex, and he observed that it functions like addiction. The empath gets a hit of validation every time they successfully manage someone's emotions. Every crisis they diffuse, every meltdown they absorb, every conflict they mediate, that validation becomes their drug of choice. And like any addiction, they need bigger doses over time to feel the same effect. This is why empaths end up in increasingly dysfunctional situations, not because they're attracted to chaos, because they've built an identity that requires chaos to feel valuable. The friend who has the same crisis every month. The empath keeps showing up because each time they help, they get proof they're needed. The partner who can't regulate their own emotions? The empath becomes their external regulatory system because it feels like love. The family that only calls when they want something? The empath answers every time because being needed feels safer than being wanted for who they are. This creates what Jung called the architecture of overfunctioning, a psychological structure where the empath has unconsciously organized their entire life around being indispensable to people who should be handling their own problems. And here's the trap. The better they get at this role, the more people come to depend on them. The more people depend on them, the more evidence they have that this is who they're supposed to be. It's a closed loop, self-reinforcing. And from the inside, it looks like purpose. Like they've found their calling. Like their sensitivity is a gift meant to be given away constantly. But Jung saw it differently. He saw people slowly disappearing into a role, mistaking their function for their identity, building their entire sense of self on a foundation of other people's needs. And that foundation? It's not stable, it's not sustainable, it's a structure waiting to collapse. The empath doesn't see this yet. They're too busy holding everyone else together to notice they're falling apart, too focused on everyone else's feelings to register that they can't even identify their own anymore. They've become so good at tuning into others that they've completely lost the signal of themselves. This is the architecture that has to crumble before the awakening can happen. And when it crumbles, it doesn't happen gradually. It happens all at once, in a single moment of devastating clarity. The collapse always starts with one person, one situation, one betrayal that's so obvious, so undeniable, that the empath's entire system of denial shatters in an instant. Jung documented this pattern so consistently he could almost predict it. The empath would come to him, usually sent by someone else who was worried about them. And within the first session, the story would be the same. Someone they loved unconditionally just revealed themselves to be exactly who they always were. And the empath, who saw it all along but chose not to see it, can no longer maintain the pretense. Let me give you the composite example Jung would reference. Imagine an empath who spent 5 years managing their partner's anxiety, depression, and emotional volatility, being the calm one, the stable one, the one who absorbed every mood swing and made excuses for every outburst. They told themselves it was love, that everyone has issues, that relationships require sacrifice, that their partner was going through a hard time and just needed support to get through it. Then one day, they discover the partner has been cheating, not a one-time mistake, an ongoing affair, with someone the empath knew, someone the partner complained about to the empath, knowing the empath would absorb that complaint and never suspect anything. The betrayal itself is devastating, but that's not what breaks the empath. What breaks them is the realization that hits immediately after. They knew. They knew the whole time. Their gut told them something was wrong. Their intuition screamed at them. Every cell in their body tried to warn them, but they silenced it, talked themselves out of it, chose to believe the lies because confronting the truth would have meant admitting they were wasting years on someone who didn't value them. This is the moment Jung called the confrontation with self-betrayal, and it's more painful than anything the other person did, because the empath realizes they didn't just get betrayed by someone else. They betrayed themselves, repeatedly, consciously, for years. Every time they ignored their intuition, every time they accepted an excuse they knew was bullshit, every time they chose to believe in someone's potential instead of their reality. That was self-betrayal. And suddenly, it's not just this one relationship. The empath starts seeing the pattern everywhere. The friend who only calls when they need something, the empath knew that. They just pretended not to notice. The family member who takes and never reciprocates, the empath saw that clearly. They just made excuses for it. The co-worker who manipulates them into doing extra work, the empath recognized the manipulation in real time. They just went along with it anyway. The entire architecture of their life was built on ignoring what they knew to be true, on choosing other people's comfort over their own reality, on being so desperate to be needed that they allowed themselves to be used. This realization doesn't make them sad, it makes them something else entirely. Cold? No, clarity isn't cold. It just feels that way to people who prefer delusion. What happens in this moment is what Jung called instantaneous integration. All the shadow material the empath had been repressing, their anger, their resentment, their judgment, their capacity to walk away, floods into consciousness at once, not gradually, not gently, all at once, like a dam breaking, and the person who emerges on the other side of that flood is someone no one recognizes, including the empath themselves, because for the first time in their life, they're not filtering their perception through hope, through potential, through what they wish was true. They're seeing reality exactly as it is, and reality, as it turns out, has been trying to get their attention for years. They just refuse to look at it. Now they can't look away. And once you've seen clearly, you can't unsee it. Can't go back to the comfortable fog of denial. Can't pretend you don't know what you know. This is the moment the empath stops caring. Not about people, about maintaining illusions that require their self-betrayal to sustain. After the moment of clarity, something happens that Jung found absolutely fascinating. The empath doesn't announce they're changing, doesn't explain what happened, doesn't try to make anyone understand. They just quietly withdraw their energy from every dynamic that was feeding off them. This withdrawal looks subtle from the outside, but the effects are immediate and catastrophic to the systems that depended on the empath's participation. Think of it like this. The empath was the power source for multiple dysfunctional systems: family dynamics, friendships, work environments, romantic relationships. All of these systems were drawing energy from the empath to maintain their dysfunction. The empath was the one absorbing Dad's anger, so he didn't have to deal with it. The one listening to Mum's complaints, so she didn't have to face her marriage. The one mediating between siblings, so they didn't have to communicate directly. At work, they were doing 3 people's jobs. At home, they were managing everyone's emotions. In friendships, they were the unpaid therapist everyone vented to without reciprocation. All of these roles required constant energy input from the empath, and the empath provided it without question, until the moment they stopped. Jung observed that this withdrawal happens on multiple levels simultaneously. The empath stops initiating contact, stops checking in, stops asking how people are doing, stops offering help before it's requested. This alone is jarring to people who are used to the empath chasing them, but it goes deeper. The empath stops being emotionally available in the way they used to be. Someone tries to dump their drama, and the empath says, "That sounds difficult," and changes the subject. Someone tries to pull them into a conflict, and the empath says, "That's between you two," and removes themselves. Someone tries the old manipulation tactics, guilt, obligation, implied expectations, and the empath just doesn't respond. Not defensively, not angrily. They just don't engage with it at all. This creates panic in people who were dependent on the empath's energy, because suddenly the power source is gone, and all the systems that were running on that power start failing immediately. The family that seemed functional falls apart, because no one else is willing to do the emotional labor of holding it together. The friend group dissolves, because the empath was the only one actually maintaining those connections. The workplace descends into chaos because the empath was the invisible infrastructure keeping everything running smoothly, and everyone looks around, trying to figure out what happened. Why is everything falling apart? What changed? The empath changed. That's what happened. They stopped volunteering their life force to keep everyone else's dysfunction comfortable. But here's what Jung found most remarkable about this phase. The empath doesn't do this with anger or resentment or desire for revenge. They do it with complete neutrality. They're not trying to hurt anyone. They're not trying to teach anyone a lesson. They're not trying to make anyone understand what they did wrong. They've simply realized that these dynamics were never their responsibility to maintain in the first place. And once you realize something isn't your responsibility, it's surprisingly easy to stop doing it. The empath who used to agonize over every decision now makes them instantly. Can you help me move? No. Can we talk about my relationship problems? No. Why are you being like this? And the empath just shrugs, because the old version of them would have felt obligated to explain, to justify, to make the other person feel better about being told no. The new version understands they don't owe anyone access to their reasoning. No is a complete sentence, and their peace matters more than someone else's understanding. This withdrawal of life force isn't cruelty, it's conservation. The empath has finally realized their energy is finite, sacred, not to be given away to anyone who asked for it. And the people who were taking that energy for granted, they're learning a hard lesson about what they actually lost. Here's where Jung's observations get really interesting, because the empath doesn't stop caring entirely. They develop something Jung called strategic empathy. They can still feel everything, still read every room, still sense unspoken tensions and hidden emotions. That capacity doesn't disappear. But something fundamental changes in how they respond to what they perceive. The old empath felt something and immediately acted on it. They sensed someone's discomfort and rushed to fix it. They detected conflict and immediately tried to mediate. They perceived pain and automatically absorbed it. It was reflexive, automatic. Like their empathy was a tap that was always running at full blast. The awakened empath still senses all of this, but now there's a pause between perception and response. A moment of evaluation where they ask, is this mine to carry? Does this person deserve my energy? Will helping here actually help or just enable? This creates what looks like selectivity, but is actually discernment. The empath isn't randomly deciding who to care about. They're making strategic decisions about where their care will actually create value versus where it will just be drained into dysfunction. Let me show you how this plays out. The empath's friend calls with a genuine crisis, a real emergency, something unexpected that they're truly struggling with. The awakened empath shows up fully, offers deep presence, practical help, emotional support. Because this is someone who's earned that access through reciprocity and respect. But then another friend calls with the same manufactured drama they create every month. The same pattern of poor choices leading to predictable consequences, wanting the empath to fix it, solve it, or at minimum make them feel better about it without having to change anything. The awakened empath says, "I'm not available for that," and ends the conversation, not out of cruelty, out of recognition that helping this person isn't helping them, it's enabling them, it's participating in their pattern, it's sacrificing the empath's peace to maintain someone else's dysfunction. This is the strategic empathy Jung documented. The empath has learned to distinguish between people who want to be saved and people who want to grow, between genuine need and manufactured crisis, between reciprocal relationships and extractive ones. And they've given themselves permission to invest their energy only where it will actually create value. This looks cold to people who were used to the empath helping everyone indiscriminately, but Jung understood it as the highest form of wisdom. Not all suffering is equal. Not all requests for help are genuine. Not everyone who asks for your energy deserves it. The awakened empath has developed the ability to say, "I see you're in pain, and I'm not going to fix that for you," without guilt, without apology, with complete certainty that allowing people to sit with consequences is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. They've also developed something Jung called protective detachment. They can witness someone's self-destruction without feeling responsible for stopping it, can watch relationships fall apart without feeling obligated to hold them together, can see people making terrible choices without intervening to save them from themselves. This doesn't mean they don't care. It means they care enough about their own well-being to not sacrifice it for people who aren't willing to help themselves. The strategic empath has learned the difference between supporting someone's growth and enabling their dysfunction. and they've developed the strength to step back when what looks like helping is actually just participating in someone's resistance to change. This level of discernment is terrifying to people who are used to the empath being an infinite resource, because they can't manipulate strategic empathy, can't guilt it, can't manufacture crises that will automatically provoke the old responses. The awakened empath sees the manipulation attempt and simply doesn't engage. They're not arguing against it, not defending themselves, just not participating. And that non-participation is more powerful than any boundary speech or explanation could ever be. So what does the empath become after they stop caring? Jung spent years studying the individuals who completed this transformation, and what he documented was remarkable. They don't become heartless. They become what he called sovereignly present. They develop a quality of being that's simultaneously more open and more protected than they ever were before. More open because they're no longer defended against their own experience. They can feel joy without waiting for it to be ruined, experience peace without feeling guilty, love people without needing to fix or change them, but more protected because they've developed what Jung called psychological immunity. They're immune to manipulation tactics that used to control them effortlessly, immune to guilt trips, immune to obligation, immune to the emotional hooks people used to use to access their energy. This creates a presence that's deeply confusing to most people, because the awakened empath seems lighter, freer, less burdened, but also completely unavailable to the old dynamics. They laugh more easily, relax more fully, engage more authentically. But the moment someone tries to drain them, manipulate them, or pull them into dysfunction, they simply disconnect. Without drama, without explanation. They just become unavailable. Jung observed that this sovereign presence attracts two types of people and repels everyone else. It attracts other awakened individuals, people who've done their own work, who value authenticity over performance, who understand reciprocity, who don't need to be saved or fixed or managed. These people recognize the empath's transformation as a mirror of their own journey. They're drawn to the quality of consciousness, not the utility they can extract. And with these people, the empath develops relationships that are deeper, richer, more nourishing than anything they experienced before. But it also attracts people who are in crisis and genuinely ready to change, not the ones who want to be saved, the ones who want to grow. They sense the empath's sovereignty and recognize it as proof that transformation is possible. With these people, the empath can offer genuine help, because it's flowing toward growth, not being drained into dysfunction. Everyone else? The energy vampires, the manipulators, the people who just want a free therapist, they self-select out. The empath's new frequency is repellent to them, not because the empath is hostile, because there's nothing for them to feed on. Jung called this the natural selection of consciousness. The awakened empath becomes a filter. Their mere presence sorts people into categories without any effort on their part. This sovereign presence also changes how the empath moves through the world. They stop apologizing for existing, stop over-explaining their choices, stop performing niceness to make others comfortable. They become comfortable with other people's discomfort. They can say things that are true but not nice, set boundaries that are necessary but inconvenient, make choices that serve them even when others disapprove. And they do all of this without the internal war that used to happen. No guilt, no second guessing, no anxiety about whether they're being selfish, because they've finally integrated the truth that Jung tried to teach all his patients. You cannot love others well until you love yourself first, not the narcissistic self-love that takes at others' expense, the foundational self-respect that refuses to participate in your own destruction. The sovereign empath has learned that their well-being is not optional, not something to prioritize after everyone else's needs are met, not a luxury they can indulge in when they have extra time and energy. Their well-being is the foundation everything else is built on, and protecting that foundation isn't selfish. It's the most responsible thing they can do. This creates what Jung called generative presence. The awakened empath becomes a source of genuine value in the world because they're no longer being drained. They have energy to create, contribute, build, because they're not giving it all away to maintain other people's dysfunction. They write the books, start the businesses, create the art, build the communities, mentor the people who are ready to grow, make real impact, because they finally have the energy to do so. The empath who stops caring about maintaining everyone else's comfort finally has the resources to care about building something meaningful. And that shift from drain to contribution, that's the entire point of the transformation. The day the empath stops caring is the day they start living. Not the life they thought they were supposed to live, the life they actually want to live. Jung understood that this transformation would be misunderstood, that people would interpret it as the empath becoming cold, selfish, heartless, that relationships would end, that people would feel betrayed. But he also understood that this was the only path to wholeness, that continuing to sacrifice yourself endlessly isn't virtue, it's slow suicide, that the unlived life is the greatest tragedy of human existence. The empath who stops caring hasn't lost their humanity. They've found their boundaries. They haven't stopped loving. They've learned to love themselves with the same intensity they used to give away. They haven't become cruel. They've become conscious. And consciousness, Jung knew, is always uncomfortable for people who prefer things the way they were. If you're going through this transformation right now, if you felt that switch flip inside you, if you're experiencing that strange combination of peace and guilt, you need to know something. The guilt is just conditioning trying to pull you back. The voice telling you you're being selfish is the internalized expectations of people who benefited from your self-betrayal. The peace, that's your soul finally getting what it needed. That's your true self emerging after years of being buried under other people's needs. Trust the peace. Question the guilt. Because the world doesn't need more empaths who sacrifice themselves endlessly. It needs people who've learned to wield their gifts consciously, who understand that protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's sacred. Jung called this the final stage of awakening, not because there's nowhere left to grow, but because you've learned the fundamental lesson. You matter. Your well-being matters. Your peace matters. And anyone who requires you to forget that doesn't deserve access to you. If this is where you are, comment sovereign below. Let it be your declaration that you've crossed the threshold, that you're done performing, that you've finally chosen yourself. Subscribe to PsycheCore for more real talk about Jung's psychology and what transformation actually looks like when you strip away the pretty Instagram version. The day you stop caring about everyone else's dysfunction is the day you start caring about your own soul. And that's not the end of empathy. That's the beginning of wisdom.